How do you do, neighbor? It's Berean Spirits time once again. The boys have gathered around and they're ready for you. So join in, make comments, and study with the guys as they try to study as the Bereans did in Acts chapter 17. And now, here's the guys.
Welcome back to a special episode of the Berean Spirits, as we do every Thursday morning here on the YouTube and Facebook, all the social medias. My name is Chris Peltz. I'm the evangelist with the Southside Church of Christ. And here in Springfield, Missouri, we've got Josh Thornhill back with us. He was on a little hiatus last week, but he is back here with us. He's with the Brookmead Church of Christ over in Johnson City, Tennessee. Josh Thornhill, man, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing all right. Had a preacher study last week that I was at, and I was teaching a class there. And I taught a class, so that's good. That's good. So
okay. Did anybody show up?
Yeah, they had a few people there. Yeah. There was actually 4 classes. I taught the first one. So.
I got you.
And it was just the introduction to Galatians. So, how could you go wrong with that?
Well, I don't know. They went wrong, so.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm back. I'm here today, and I'm doing all right.
That's right. That's right. And then you'll be gone next week.
Then I'll be gone next week because I'll be traveling.
Yeah.
Certain.
I got you.
Young lady. So.
All right. We got Richard Dodson with the Kearney Church of Christ, who's throwing up all kinds of links on the social medias, inviting folks to come and listen and check us out. If by the way, if you are watching the program live, leave a comment. Let us know where you're watching or listening from, or shoot us an email at bereanspirits@gmail.com, especially if you listen to us on podcast. Richard, how you doing, man?
I'm kind of suffering with a sunburn, but other than that, I'm doing okay. I forgot to wear a hat the other day when I was mowing. I'm not in mowing mode yet, so I mean, there's certain things you learn to do when you're mowing, and by the end of the year, you got it down. But at the beginning of the year, you're like a rookie all over again. And yeah, the sun kissed me. So
man, oh man,
I'm looking at my face on the screen, and you guys look normal, and I look like
a cherry tomato.
Yeah. I was
Maybe not a cherry tomato. Just look like a tomato.
That's a big tomato.
I know. I look ripe. I'm good and ripe.
So. Oh man, yeah. Them things can hurt too. It's
yes.
Yes, yes. That's right. How much more you can say to that? Yep.
Right. and people, people lay out to get sun. I don't understand why they do that. I mean, I know they want to look dark and everything, but it just seems, I'd rather just, have my normal skin.
Well, of course, some folks don't burn either. I mean, for the most part, even if I burn, it goes away quick and turns into a tan just because of, I think, my heritage. I can get really dark if I'm in the sun for a long time. Wow. So, but different people. Different ways.
I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, so I don't. I wouldn't say I tan. I do get darker, but I don't tan. So I burn. So,
man,
yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah,
burn, baby, burn.
Yeah. Well, we certainly hope everybody has been doing well and keeping safe from a lot of the storms that have run through, especially here in the Midwest and parts of the South and even up in the plains. It has been. I don't know if there was a tornado yesterday. That's 5 days.
Oh, they had this massive one out there in Kansas. Man, I was watching the storm chasers last night, and it was a beautiful storm.
Sure.
It was fun to watch, but these tornadoes just keep dropping.
Yeah.
So it's that time of year. We're in the tornado alley, so
it's been pretty bad. And it's going to be a bad year, I think, for hurricanes too. I think
they're saying that. They say that all the time. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I mean, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, you know what? That just means that there's going to be a lot more folks facing some adversity in their
I was
lives.
waiting on you to go there.
Well, I get there. But that's what we're going to be talking about: facing adversity and having success in adversity. And Richard, you made a comment. Josh asked what we were going to be talking about, and you talked about in adversity you have choices, and you can either. I'm trying to remember exactly how you worded it.
Well, thrive or die.
Thrive or die. Okay.
Yeah.
All
See,
right.
I am somebody I am a natural whiner. I mean,
Yeah.
that comes as natural to me. Well, you give me a lot to whine about, but I am somebody who just, it must be natural to me. I don't know, but this is something I've always battled. And so I understand how, people have to, they might be prone the same way. Some people handle adversity great. They're always positive about everything, and they just go into it thinking, "Oh, I'm going to get through this. This is no big deal." That's not me. I mean, I would have been one of those, back in the time. I would have done a lot of wandering in the wilderness if I had, been in the time of Moses. I have just a way of doing that. And we have to learn from that. If we don't want uh, the same type of faith that the Israelites had, we need to learn from their mistakes. And whining is something the Lord does not like.
Right.
And so, when we face adversity, we have to remain positive and put a smile on our face and be positive about it. And
Yeah.
that's not always easy.
It isn't. And when we talk about adversity, I mean, there's lots of things that cause adversity in our lives. And sometimes it's, people going through the loss of property and storm damage and different things. And, the financial difficulties maybe that come with that, or the loss of a job. Sometimes it's with our health, suffering with cancer or some other type of terrible disease, or injury, things like of that nature. Sometimes it's the way we're treated by others. Sometimes others bring adversity upon us, either out of meanness and cruelty, or ignorance. However it is, there's lots of ways in which we can face adversity. Some of it's self-inflicted. Some of it, is brought on by others. Some of it is just merely accidents or by chance. And
some are, the adversity that your loved ones face, that hurts us too.
It does. That's right.
Yeah, you have experience with that right now. So
yeah, it's difficult when you have loved ones that are facing or going through their own adversity, their own difficulties. Absolutely. You never want that. You never want to, experience that, but you don't want them, right, to experience that. And so you hurt when they hurt, in a lot of ways. And so regardless of the adversity that you're facing, right, James chapter 1 verse 2 says, my brethren, count it all joy when you face various trials. And
now that's a trick.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Count it all joy. Oh, look at me. I stubbed my toe. Ow. But I'm so happy about it. Oh, I broke my arm. Ow. But I'm so happy about it. Oh, my neighbor threw rocks at my window. Oh, but I'm so happy about it. I mean, everything about that just seems backwards.
Well,
I think that's exactly what the text is saying.
I know. So I'm like, that's not exactly what the text is saying. Oh, I'm so happy about this.
Count it all joy.
But that's not what he's saying.
All
yeah,
right,
it's not like, yes, I just totaled my brand new car.
Yeah, woo! I'm so happy. Woo! Yeah, no, that's not what he's saying. But
he says, count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds.
That's right. Well, that's right.
Yeah.
All right, then. Trial.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you've got. Josh, go
Got 'em
ahead
all.
for a second. Go.
Okay, so I think I guess a good way that we could illustrate this is with the example of Joseph. You think when Joseph was being abused by his brothers that he was sitting there just be like, yes, I'm being hated by my brothers, or when he's sold into slavery, or when he's accused falsely by Potiphar's wife, or when he spent 2 years in prison. I mean, I don't think Joseph was sitting there just with, this is, I'm so happy that my life has turned out this way. But rather, he is able to look back and recognize the value of what God did through those trials that he faced. And he specifically says that to his brothers. You meant it to me for evil, but God meant it to me for good. I think that's the overall idea of counting it all joy. You're finding the blessing that can come through those difficulties.
Okay, now wait a minute. You're saying he looked back, though. Okay, James says count it all joy when it happens.
Yeah, and the idea is having a view of eternity, right? I mean, having a view, even when you're going through trials, knowing that God can make good things happen, knowing that there can be some positive things. Not that you're happy that those trials are happening, and that's kind of how you made it sound, and that's why we're like, well, you're not happy that you're going through trials, but you have a joy that passes understanding that Paul wrote to the Philippians about, in the understanding that while this is difficult, you're not, oh, I'm happy that my loved one died, but you have joy that's a trial, and that's
but that's not what I meant.
But that's how it came across. That's why I'm like, that's not saying, oh, I'm happy, oh, my loved one died. Wahoo!
I see it. Let me explain it a better way. I see it as saying that I have an opportunity before me, and I should be happy about it, because if I succeed in it, it will produce steadfastness in my life. That's what I see James teaching.
And I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Now, because of that, I should be joyful in the fact I have an opportunity.
Sure.
All right. Now, what is the opportunity? Those things I talked about. That's the opportunity that's before me. I'm not exactly happy that my neighbor threw rocks at my window. Yeah. I'm not happy I stubbed my toe. I'm not happy I broke my arm.
Okay.
But I am happy about the opportunity that's before me.
Yeah.
And that's the part I have a problem with. I look at the life of Joseph that Josh was bringing up, and looking back, well, that's easy. To look back after you've already been through it and say, oh, I should have been happy. Yeah. I should have been joyful. The opportunity was there. But if he was upset, and whining about it when he was going through it, well, I mean, that, looking back's not the trick. The trick is to notice it when it happens. That's the trick. And that's what's going to enable us, I believe, to succeed in adversity.
That is a part of it, and I'll give you that one. That I would agree with that. Although there's no indication that Joseph had to wait to look back, because when did he whine about those things that he was going through?
Well, it doesn't really say that.
It doesn't record it, I think is what I heard Josh say.
Come on. He couldn't have been too happy about it. So
yeah. Well, and again, that is certainly, a challenge for us. But I think for us really to get to that point, we have to be able to define success, right? I mean, you titled this show, Richard, Success in Adversity, I think.
Success with Adversity. Yeah.
Success with Adversity.
I had a hard time trying to,
no, I like
with the right words.
But I like that, because it really gives us that opportunity and that challenge to define success, because too many people today are using a worldly view to define success, right? We define success when you're the boss, right? When you've climbed that corporate ladder, that's when you're successful. When you've got that degree from a university, that's when you're successful. We define success in such worldly ways that we lose sight of what true success is, especially when it allows us to be joyful and it allows us to really have that eternal long-term view that we're to have as Christians.
All right, then let's ask Josh. What is success when facing adversity, when it happens? What is success in that? How would you define that?
I would say that, when you go through a difficult situation, let's say from a physical standpoint, it's a failure, but you strengthen your faith, you draw closer to God, you are more faithful to Him. That is success.
Yes.
That is the spiritual success that we're looking for. I mean, it's the growing in the character, and it's like the 1 Peter 1 and verse 7 where he talks about the gold being tested by fire. It's placed into the fire and it's brought out purified, and that's what the success is the purification, if you will, of ourselves, of our faithfulness, of our resolve, of our faith, our love toward God. It's that that I guess. I don't know necessarily what the right word is, but that strengthening of ourselves in Him and to do His will. That's the measure of success that we look for.
Yeah, that certainly should be our view, right? Our perspective, and I think Jeremiah is probably one of my favorite examples of this. Because if anyone faced adversity, it was Jeremiah, right? They had people that were, here comes terror on every side. Everything you say, Jeremiah, it's all about destruction. They're mocking him. He's being thrown in pits. The words that he writes are being torn up by the king, and people are rejecting him. False prophets that we know are false prophets now were calling him a false prophet, saying, "Oh no, he's wrong. It's not true." The people weren't listening, and God told him, "If you tell the people to repent, and I'll spare the temple. You tell the people to repent, and I'll spare their lives." And they didn't listen. And by all measure of worldly standards, he was a failure at everything God told him to do. But he was one of the most successful prophets for the very reason Josh pointed out. He did what God told him to do. The people didn't listen, right? They mocked him. They ridiculed him. His home was destroyed. The temple was destroyed. They were taken into captivity. Everything went wrong from a worldly perspective. But in Jeremiah's life, he was one of the most successful prophets in the respect that he was faithful to God, and he didn't quit or give up on God, even though we are told he felt like it at times. He always turned back to God, and he did what God told him to do. That was success.
Yeah, and he was close to whining, I guess you could say.
Sure.
But I got some verses I want to share.
More than close.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And he had but you guys haven't heard whining until you heard me.
Nah, we've been listening to you for years, man.
Yeah, but I got 3 verses I want to read, or 3 scriptures.
Yeah.
And just interrupt me when you want to make a comment. Okay. So, but this goes to the success of afflictions. 2 Corinthians, the 1st chapter, in verse 8 through 10. I want to read this. For we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia. For we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death, but that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. Now think about that.
Yeah.
There was a purpose behind that adversity, and God was allowing this to take place to teach them something. Now, another passage is in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 through 10, and this is Paul talking about his thorn in the flesh. And the reason the Lord didn't remove it, it was to keep him from becoming conceited. Because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given him in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass him, to keep him from becoming conceited. And then he goes on and talks about how he had prayed 3 times to have this thing removed. But in the end, he found out this was the will of God. And because there was a purpose behind it, he was thankful for that. And then one more passage I do want to share is in Romans 5 and verse 3 through 5, when Paul says, not only he goes, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And he goes on and talks to, about some of the things that it produces. But we understand that, affliction that comes upon us, does produce things.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously God allows certain things to take place in our life because it's going to help our spiritual development. And we shouldn't be blind to that when the afflictions start. We should be thinking that could be a possibility. This may be something the Lord has allowed to take place in order to make me a better servant. And that should cause us joy.
It should. And I mean, it's difficult when you're going through the thing at the very time, right? Especially when it first comes upon you. That there is that a difficulty in that, no doubt about it.
That's why we got to read those passages.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if you're not going to the Bible and reading passages like that when you come across those things, then you may have a tendency to whine. But if you focus on what the Bible and remind yourself what the Bible teaches, then that's going to help you keep your head on straight and keep you from whining about it. Trust me, I got a lot of experience about this. Not only have I failed in whining, but I've succeeded as well. I mean, I've learned how to do this a little bit. Not that I'm great at it, but those who are listening that say, hey, this is tough, man, I'm right there with you. I mean, I am right there with you. I know how hard this is. And my personal life, I have very little adversity. The Lord is trying to get me to heaven the easiest way I can get there. Other people suffer so greatly and they are so strong, and I admire them for the strength that they show. And I feel really, honest to goodness, I feel so ashamed by their strength that they have in the Lord.
Yeah. Well, with that, you said I could interrupt you anytime. Let me do it now.
All right.
What does he say about the wealthy?
Steal their money?
Steal their money. No, that's a Democrat. What does he say?
To all our Democrat watchers,
email us.
The comments on this program are not those that
Now, how easy is it for them to get to heaven?
I didn't hear you. What'd you say?
How easy is it for them to get into the kingdom?
It's hard. Yeah, it's very difficult
because they've got it easy, right? Yeah. And in a sense, that can really become an affliction because in the aspect of relying upon your riches, relying upon your own success, or your all of these things, losing sight of the fact that God is the one blessing you and thinking you can do it all on your own, that can create issues and problems in and of itself. Although we are talking about, I think we have the idea of more of afflictions than losing sight with blessings. But Josh, I want to, if you have something to comment on that, but I do have a question for you. And that is, when do we see the church and evangelism thriving? Under what circumstances in the New Testament do we see it thriving?
You see it thriving through the persecution. I believe it's Acts 8 here. Let me pull this up.
Yeah, it is.
Verse 1, on that day there was a great persecution persecution began against the church in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And from Satan's perspective, it kind of seems like, good, I can scatter them. I'm going to shut this down. But it says in verse 4, therefore, those who had been scattered went about proclaiming the good news of the word. So it only served to further the cause, because now that message is being carried out farther than it had been before. And so it was one of the greatest opportunities for the gospel to be taken to the world as God had intended it to be done. So I think you see the opportunity for the gospel itself to thrive in such an opportunity. And in relation to that, I want to make this point. As our nation becomes more and more ungodly, as it becomes more and more hostile towards Christians and our faith, it worked then, and it can work now. And so let's not lose hope or lose sight of the fact that the gospel has the power to work in the hearts of men and to change lives.
Yeah.
And if we're out there spreading it, it'll still thrive even in today's culture.
Usually people turn to something, right, when there are difficulties, right? And so as things get bad and turn in a very negative way in our country and around the world, really, generally people are turning and looking for answers, looking for something. And it is an opportunity for us, as much as we don't like or don't want to go through some of the difficulties that are happening in our country and around the world. It is an opportunity for us to show people just how short term this world and this life is, right? Temporal. These things are, but there is an eternity that we should be preparing for and that we should be looking forward to.
Do you remember the Joplin tornado? How bad that was?
Yeah.
There is a video where people were like in a convenience store. And
Yeah. I have a friend who was in that convenience store.
yeah, they went in a meat locker or someplace, and
a walk-in cooler in the middle of the store.
Somebody had their cell phone on, and when the tornado was hitting it and just tearing up the building, you can hear the people in there calling out to God. And that was the thing. They were calling to God. I mean, they were in bad shape. And at that moment, they were calling out to God. Now, I don't know what they did before then, but it goes to prove your point, Chris. Sometimes when adversity hits, it does cause some people to turn to God. And we see that in the days of Jesus, right? Who were the people who came to Jesus when he walked on the earth? A lot of them were the sick. They saw an opportunity to get healed. And so, that's something to think about when we're looking at adversity, is there can be a turning to God when bad things take place.
Yeah. Well, there's that expression, there's no atheist in a foxhole. And
that's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, that's usually, when things are real bad, there's some type of emergency cord something somebody wants to grab and pull. And a lot of times they're turning to God, and it is up to us. We have a huge and grave responsibility to make sure that that we are always proclaiming the word of God. And that's why, you go to 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 2, and he says, preach the word in season and out of season. Convince, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and teaching. That is, we need to be preparing. We need to be doing our best, because we never know what adversity people are facing in their lives, what affliction they're going through at that time. It may not be some type of mass event that a country is going through or a certain people are going through. It can be very personal and not affecting anyone else or very few others around them. And so we shouldn't lose sight of evangelism when it comes to our neighborhoods, because you think about all the changes we go through in a very short period of time, whether it is, a move, we've mentioned diagnosis before, having children, grandchildren, a death in the family, a marriage, a divorce, whatever it is that someone goes through, things that we've gone through, even in the past 5 or 10 years, that have really caused us to look back at things we've believed, things we've done. Those in our neighborhood have experienced some of the same things, or worse, perhaps, and they've, maybe 2 years ago would have said, no, don't come knock on my door, and yet now they're waiting for someone to knock on your door because of the changes they've gone through in their lives. And so we've got to be diligent and always, being out there and spreading the gospel of Christ.
That's go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say, in relation to your comment there on the meat locker in Joplin, in the Holocaust, there was a gas chamber where, or maybe it was a dungeon where the Jews were kind of, stored. And somebody gone back and looked after the fact and kind of saw scratched in the wall there was a certain saying. And it says, I believe in the sun, even when it is not shining. I believe in love, even when I cannot feel it. And I believe in God, even when he is silent. And I think that kind of is, kind of relates to what it is that we're talking about. Because sometimes when adversity hits, like Job, we kind of feel like God has abandoned us, or God's not there. Where is he? Or David, read Psalm 13, the first 4 verses. David acts or speaks as if God has just completely turned his back on him. And he knows that's not the case. He comes back to later in the Psalm to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Psalm 22. Yeah.
Yeah, that as well. But, the idea is when adversity strikes, when we're praying or crying out to God, and it doesn't seem like God is listening or God hears, and then the trial just continues on and continues on, that's where we're going to have to really dig in and choose to continue to trust him. Trust him even when we can't see him, and even when we can't feel him, because we know the promises that he's given to us, that he's not going to leave us or forsake us. And so that's where we just kind of dig our heels in and choose to continue to trust, even when the trial just seems like it's going to continue on.
I'd like to talk about, Chris was talking about setting an example for others when the trial happens. And that made me think Acts 20, when, Paul talked about the verse 17 through 21. And when the elders of the church came to him from Ephesus, he reminds them about how he had lived before them. He says he served the Lord with all humility and with tears and with trials. And he's using this to remind them, to basically just tell them, listen, that's your example. That's what you got to remember about me. That's what you need to be doing in your life. And so, yeah, we have to understand people are watching when adversity hits. And part of the development of younger Christians is the example that older Christians set. And so we have to be mindful of that when it takes place.
A good example of that kind of thinking, there's a preacher that I was used to get together and study with, and he would tell me the story about several years ago. He and his family were up at a camp somewhere with some Christians, and they got a phone call that his son had built a raft with a friend of his, and they got out into the Gulf of Florida and got carried away by a current, and they couldn't find them. And so here he is in this camp surrounded by Christians with this news, with all these things flying through his head. Am I going to have to go identify a body? Is there even going to be a body to identify? Like, am I ever going to see my son again? All these things going through his mind. And it ended up turning out that they found the son and the friend, and they were fine, but they had just kind of been, carried away by the current. But a man came up to him and said after the fact, I appreciate seeing how a person of faith handles a situation like that. And that same man, just a couple years later, lost his son, who went swimming on Sunday afternoon and got carried under and drowned. And so the point was, my friend was telling me, maybe I wasn't ready to lose my son, but I had to go through that to help prepare this other man to lose his just a short time later.
That's a sad story.
It is. But the reality is, our trials, like the song, may this trial bring a blessing, journey bring a blessing.
Yeah.
Maybe there is something that we're facing in this trial that can be a blessing to somebody else in a future trial that they're going to face. Maybe we can be the example to help bolster somebody in their trial that they're going to come across years down the road. And so I think you're absolutely right that we have the opportunity to not just strengthen ourselves, but to strengthen others through their trials by continuing to hold fast to what it is that we know.
That's a good lesson, Josh. That was worth me tuning in.
But and another opportunity or example, I went to I was visiting a friend of mine several years ago, and while we were there, one of the members of the congregation was in the hospital, and so he and I went down because he needed to go see this guy in the hospital. So I went with him, and I remember his wife, kind of just frustrated because they were trying to figure out what's wrong with him, and she was saying, I don't understand why. He's such a good guy, and if it shouldn't be him, it should be maybe me or somebody else. But he's such a good guy, good faithful man. And as we were leaving, I got to thinking about him and the idea of Job. Maybe sometimes the sufferings that we endure are given to us so that we can be that example. Why did Job suffer? Well, maybe it was just so Job could be the example of steadfastness in suffering for others. What a difficult thing that is, but what a glorious purpose.
Yeah. That's definitely putting your brother's needs ahead of your own. Of course, right. That's being applied by faith, but yeah. And of course, we have to live by faith. So, yeah.
It needs to be genuine, right? I mean, it can't be a manufactured or a, a lot of times, and so it's hard. This gets back to what you said at the very beginning, the difficulty we go through, because a lot of times it's like we feel like we need to put on a fake smile in a sense, but at the same time, true, genuine faith will, God gets you through these things. And I'll let you make your comment, and then I want Josh once again to explain to us 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. I love his explanation. I think he just says it so well. Go ahead, Richard.
I'm looking forward to it now. I'll just make a real quick comment because I want to get to Josh. It must be good. But, we also understand, though, that we are tested through affliction. Isaiah 48:10's a verse I have opened when he talked about how we're tried in the furnace of affliction. And so, sometimes we're just being tested. Abraham was tested in Hebrews chapter 11 and 1 Peter 4. There's a trial that comes upon us to test us in verses 12 through 13. So, sometimes, it's just to see if we are going to be faithful. The Lord may allow something to take place to see, what do you place first? Do you place me first, or do you place yourself first? And that's what we've seen with Abraham and Isaac. You can only imagine the love that he would have had for Isaac. I know his love. I have a son. I mean, I understand the love that Abraham had for Isaac, but he believed that God's promises so much. I mean, he had to, you could call that whatever you wanted to. That sacrificing your son on the altar is a command of God that would just cause all kinds of affliction. But he survived it because he believed in God and his promises. I mean, to the point where he thought God would raise him from the dead because there's no way he would lie to him. So, that's something we have to understand as well, is that sometimes the Lord allows affliction to come, our adversity to come upon us because we're being tried. Mm-hmm. But now let's get to the thing that we're all waiting for. Josh Thornhill with 1 Corinthians 10:13.
Thank you. Hold the applause.
Golf clap.
First Corinthians 10:13 says, "No temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with the temptation will provide the way of escape so that you will be able to endure it." And the phrase that I think is often used is beyond what you are able. And when people are going through trials, typically people will try to comfort them by saying, God's not going to give you more than you can handle. Well, first of all, that's not what the text is saying. It's saying God will not allow you to face temptation that's stronger than what you're able to endure. And he'll give you the opportunity to be able to make your way through it. But also, that's not really helpful to people, because if being strong means losing a child or something like that, people don't want to be strong. But on the other side, the idea is with Job, I think is a good example of this. God allows Job and us really to come to the very end of ourselves because we trust in, he wants us to trust in him. He's not going to give us more than he can handle. He can bear it with us. We can find our strength in him to endure the trials that we're facing. And so, and what God wants is for us to trust in him. And sometimes that requires us being brought to the very end of ourselves. And then we just surrender ourselves and give ourselves over to God and allow him to strengthen us to go through the trial that we are facing. It's difficult. It's certainly still not easy. But I think going through something like that will only serve to strengthen your faithfulness to God and your appreciation for him and what he has done for you.
Very, very good. And I appreciate it. And, Jesus said, cast your cares upon me. Right. And he talks about his burden and how light and easy that is. And that's because he's taking ours when we'll give it to him and turn to him. And that's even in Philippians chapter 4 and other passages. I think he talks about the very same thing about giving those things over to him. Philippians, Paul, in Philippians 4 verse 11 talked about learning to be abased and to abound, right? To have abundance and to do without. And he goes on verse 13 to say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that's really where we must turn if we're going to be successful in anything that matters. We must turn to Christ and receive strength, have faith and have a view of eternity for anything to matter and to really and truly be successful. So, Richard, you got any last thoughts?
Listen, when adversity hits, before you start whining, make yourself go to the Bible and see what the Bible has to say about it. Just make yourself do that. And that, hopefully that will reshape your whole attitude. You don't want to sin. That's the main thing, is don't sin, because that was the same thing the Israelites did. They saw the glory of God. They seen all his wondrous works. And then when adversity hit, they started whining, and that made the Lord repent. He wanted to just do away with all of them. I don't want God to think that about me. And I know you don't want him to think that about you. So when it hits, go to the Bible and just listen to what the Bible has to say about this. And and maybe that will help you withstand it. And pray. That will help.
Yeah. Josh, last thoughts?
If you kind of look at the Psalms, you kind of see a pattern from the life of David. And we kind of referenced that a little bit with Psalm 13, Psalm 22 a minute ago, and many others. But David often in the Psalms is kind of just like, how long are you just going to leave me here? And how long are you going to abandon me? Kind of thought. But then he always comes back to praising God for the goodness of God. And so I think there's three things in that we can remember when we're going through the trials. Number one, look back and remind yourself of all the good things that God has done for you already. And by the way, even if he doesn't do another single thing for you, he's already done enough. Look back and be thankful. Look up to him in trust that he will continue to be with you as he has promised. And then look ahead in hope of the blessings that are awaiting those who endure, those who persevere. That heaven is placed as that goal, that reward that we will obtain when we endure, and don't lose sight of that when we can dwell with the Lord forevermore.
One more thing I can throw in there. Don't assume you know the reasons why God allowed affliction to take place. Don't assume that. Just know it's your purpose not to sin and to keep obeying. And perhaps, like Josh said, at the end, you can look back and then maybe you'll have a guess as to what the Lord's purpose was. But all things will be revealed someday. But unless it's revealed in Scripture, you don't know what purpose is going on in your life. But one thing you do know, there is a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One other thing I would add to what you were saying, Josh, looking back, looking up, and looking forward, look down in humility.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, that's the publican standing afar off, couldn't even lift his eyes to heaven, beating his chest, saying, Lord God, be merciful to me, a sinner. So, folks, we appreciate everybody tuning in, listening to Berean Spirits. Hope you got something out of this. Hope it's been an encouragement and give you some things to think about. Remember to share out the link. If you listen to podcasts, be sure and search for Berean Spirits on podcast as well. Until next time, remember to search the Scriptures with Berean Spirits.
Well, folks, that's all for today. Don't worry. Lord willing, the guys will be back next week for another Bible study on Berean Spirits. Until then, let the guys hear from you. Drop them some email at bereanspirits@gmail.com. They'd love to hear from you. Until next time, let's keep studying that Bible.